you might have a limited reach. But but that's fine. Like that shouldn't be like the metric that we judge of like the worthiness of something. If you
Mm-hmm.
enjoy it, if you share it with other people, it's like, I don't know. There's something for everyone.
Welcome to the Creative Navigators.
We are two unlikely friends exploring resistance by examining the intersection of the creative process, productivity culture, and artistic expression.
Tell me about what you're working on. Like, what's a project that you're either working on or wanting to get into?
The project that I'm working on or wanting to get into. Well, I think I don't know if I've talked about it already before, but I am really interested in like sequential art. I'm really interested
Hmm.
in comic book, I guess. I mean, I don't know what the what is it, the term DR or whatever is for that. But yeah, we've got graphic novel, comic book, sequential art, all those
Mm-hmm.
lovely terms. I'm just really interested in storytelling through that because it combines writing, it combines illustration, which I love doing both. And I have a story idea in my head, but I'm like, I feel like it's the type of story that lends itself well to like a visual storytelling,
Mm-hmm.
but also there's stuff about it that I'm like, well, how would this work? Which is, I think, any story. It's a problem solving, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's all that. Yeah, I won't get too into like what the idea is specifically, but I am trying to kind of learn a little bit more about how to brainstorm that stuff and how to sketch that stuff out in like a
Mm-hmm.
broad sense, like scripting for graphic novels, comic books, all that kind of thing. Like how do you start visually interpreting the story? Like how do you write for a medium that is mostly visual, and how do you have like strong sense of narrative through that? I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
learn more about that before I really commit to page, but I really think that I need to kind of just do it too.
Mm-hmm.
Like just kind of mess around with something so I have something to kind of get the ball rolling. And
Yeah.
but I've been thinking about it, and I feel like that's what I really want to do. And then that kind of plays into my longer term goal of really updating my portfolio. I want to have like a good body of work
Sure.
that can kind of showcase like what I can do. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, I went to school for animation. I like animation. I don't know if I want to be an animator, but I like storytelling and I like drawings.
Okay.
So I feel
Yeah.
like it's probably kind of like the perfect
Sure.
marriage of those skills, those interests of mine. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking about.
That's kind of what we've been talking about a lot is how do you just kind of get started, right? That's often the hardest part is um, you can plan, you can sketch, you can plan, you can sketch, but at a certain point you kind of just got to start doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I something I've struggled with for a long time now is I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So if I don't have a very clear goal and path in mind, I won't even start on a project because I
Yeah.
got to get right from the beginning. And something that I'm learning is I'm trying to get back into RPG Maker, which you were just about to ask what I'm working on. Um,
Mm.
and I'm also trying to get back into writing. And I'm working on a short story for there's a local writers group that's having a competition right now. And it
Oh.
occurred to me as because I want to write my Bethel experience in a novel, but then I also kind of want how would I write my life story, and I don't. And it occurred to me like just write your story, and then in the editing process you can go back and flesh out certain details, and you can
Mm-hmm.
change. Like I'm going to literally write the names of the people that I'm basing characters off of, and then I'll go back and change those names later. Um, So that has been the thing for me to just get started is just write and don't worry so much about making it perfect from the get go. And that's been helping a lot. I'll sit down
Yes.
every night and I'll write 5, 10 pages, and I've made more progress in the last couple months than I have in 10 years of trying to become a creative.
Yeah, I definitely get that. I definitely have that perfectionist impulse where we really start editing ourselves before
Yeah,
we
before you
even.
even put something on the paper.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm wondering if there's like exercises that help kind of like. I know that I used to do this thing where actually when I wrote my novel, I well, I was able to complete that because first of all I had time.
Hmm.
Second of all, I really did just kind of like I need to just go for it.
Right.
Just start. It doesn't really matter where. You're always gonna go back. There's always gonna be rewrites. But I feel like what helped me even start to begin with was doing these kind of writing exercises where I would just do like just free stream of
Yeah.
consciousness like writing where you just start, you kind of just literally write what's coming out,
Yeah.
even if it's just nonsense, even if you're saying like I really don't know what to write right now, like,
Yeah,
and you just
absolutely.
write that thought, just keep writing, just keep saying something, and then eventually something will come out. But also just the exercise of like putting your thoughts on paper, putting your
Hmm.
thoughts on or a screen.
Hmm.
Just the act of doing that is a lot, to help you like get, or even with drawing, like it's just draw,
Get
like
something on
literally
the
draw.
page. Yeah.
And it's like I feel like for a lot of people that's like the biggest hurdle is
Hmm.
just how do you even start, how
Right.
do you even start? And sometimes people will say, well, you just gotta start, but
You
then
just
it's kind
gotta
of
do.
like, well,
Yeah, but
there's
how?
there's one more little bridge,
Yeah.
just one little tiny little, bridge over a tiny little pond that you need to
Hmm.
kind of still a little cross, just to kind of get from like that one little step to the next step, and it's like, and that's the disconnect, right? Like I feel
Hmm.
like, well, okay, I mean, but I think when people ask that, I think they're really asking like, how do I get over this
Oh yeah.
paralyzing fear of beginning, and it's like, well, sure, you can just start, but once you've developed a practice, it's hard to remember, or even maybe you never even had that much of an issue with it.
Hmm.
But I feel like, yeah, there's got to be a way to like address like beginning,
Right.
which, by the way, I think is actually a really good theme for maybe a beginning,
Oh yeah.
like introductory episode. How do we even begin and create a problem?
Here we're doing it. That's what we're literally doing is
Maybe.
just avant-garde. Something I just saw once was like just turn the faucet on. It's like if you sit down
Yep.
with the intention of writing and you sit there and you stare at a blank screen, nothing's ever going to magically come out. You have to start, like you're saying, you have to
Mm-hmm.
start the process somehow. So turn the faucet on, literally, right? Just getting your hand in motion of drawing shapes, drawing whatever thing, a cartoon character. Load up your favorite character and try to mimic, or just and then and what I've noticed for myself is for my writing process, I'll do that where I'll just start saying, this my day. So this morning I woke up at 7:30, and then I laid in bed for 20 minutes, and and then all of a sudden you're just like launching into this stream of consciousness, and it just kind of that's the only way, the only surefire way I
Mm-hmm.
know of actually tapping into that creative part of your brain is to just literally just force yourself to start. And you're right, because there's that bridge. It's like how do you divide the not doing to the creative process is how do you cross that bridge? If you could figure that answer out, you'd be rich and famous. So yeah. So here we are, beginning to create. We can just kind of launch into what even the heck are we doing here? What's the point of this little project we're
This
starting?
project. I think the point is that we as creative people want to explore. We want to explore this idea of creativity and work, and think about like how our relationship to it is, and and find how do we apply more creativity in our everyday life, in work, in our practice, in our relationships, and how does that also relate to like community? I think we're trying to connect these things together that we're seeing a lot of connections with, and we're interested specifically in these connections because we're also interested. We're seeing how creativity really is in the realm of like resistance to capitalism, because capitalism, we see how it kind of operationalizes, or whatever the term is, like work in a certain kind of way that really kind of cuts out creativity, spontaneity, joy from work, and work becomes only what is useful to producing profit,
Right.
capital, which is basically power for only a few. And we are looking at ways that creativity can be used to resist those particular ideas. And so we're going to do that through conversations. We're going to explore different topics within that umbrella, which, is pretty broad, pretty vast. And we also want to talk to different people, different creatives. And I think we have a pretty expansive concept of what we consider to be creativity and creative people. So it's not just going to necessarily be, what you would think like a visual artist or a performer in some kind of way. We also want to talk to people who maybe are not artists in that traditional sense, but are still utilizing creativity and still using that to kind of resist a lot of these external forces that are kind of affecting the way that they view the world and the way that they relate to, their daily life, and all the different things that they do. The concept of productivity, there's a really rich vein to kind of explore and uncover, and we're just really interested in talking to each other and different people about it, and
Yeah.
seeing what we find. And a big part of this project is also to do it through building community, and seeing how other people do that, and seeing how we can even
Yeah.
do that. And we hope that, future listeners will kind of, benefit from that, either in their everyday life, or even maybe finding ways that they can apply it to themselves, or even just, just changing their perceptions, and expanding the realm of what is like possible for them.
Yeah.
Very wordy, but yeah.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's tough to. I'm trying to like work on that elevator pitch, and it's hard to distill it down. The best way I can think of it is from my own perspective. I would just use like my experience on the internet to kind of walk through my mental process. Because when I first started using the internet seriously, it was 2004-ish. And I remember, there was all these websites that were dedicated to just people would make stuff. They would make animations and art and music and videos even before YouTube was a thing. And they would just make them just because of the fun. They loved it. And the community that would pop up around those websites, there was, right there.
Yeah, maybe Newgrounds.
Newgrounds, yeah, Newgrounds, or like, Tumblr was a thing back then. And gosh, all kinds of addicting games, flash games. People would just make stuff to just make it. And then somewhere around, I want to say the invention of YouTube, and then especially when people could start making money from YouTube, you saw this transition away from like art for art's sake towards here's the first legitimate opportunity that people have to make a money. And at first it was a really good money from your art, from uploading videos, or especially videos, but music and other 10 seconds of celebrity that you could get from doing it. And now I feel like, I could be wrong about this, but I feel like when I'm on the internet, I'm just being fed over and over and over again. It's not art for art's sake. It's not even necessarily that it's it's bad per se. It's just that the primary intention of everything you run into on the internet now is trying to make you a consumer, and content to
Mm,
me is meant to just be consumed, not art that makes you think, that makes you challenge your beliefs, that makes you dig deeper into the world and your connections with other people. And so what this project to me represents is finally I'll tell on myself here is I read the 4 Hour Work Week in 2008, and I've been on a kick ever since of like I want to make a side hustle on the internet that lets me, you know, laptop nomad, and 1 week I'll live in China and the next I'll be in Japan, and that had been my driving goal for so long. And now coming back to a place of community and art for art's sake, and art as a form of resistance almost against the capitalistic system that just wants
mm-hmm.
to extract as much value out of we can. And you and I have been talking, this is like close to 2 years that you and I have been talking about doing a project like this. And even just that 2 year span has the ups and downs of life that we've had and the various projects we've taken on. And it's just kind of, it's
Yeah.
something that keeps getting pushed to the back. And I think you and I are both at a place where we're ready to like, we need this outlet in our life. We need the community and the creativity to be found. We need that to rebuild us and to encourage us and to like renew our love for the work that we do.
Right.
So I also have my
Right.
long wordy rant too. So you're in good company.
But I mean, but I think that really does kind of put it into perspective of like what we want to do with the project.
Yeah. We're not launching Patreon on day one. We're not saying go buy our T-shirts on day one.
Right, right. And we and it's we understand like, we're not, it's not a mystery like why uh content, quote unquote, gets or rather why like artistic output, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
gets like transformed into content and has to become like a money making endeavor, because people start where with doing this out of joy, out of like
Mm-hmm.
just interest, wanting to just produce things and share it with people.
Yeah.
But then it's how do you justify the time and the effort that goes
Yeah.
into it,
Right.
and to kind of like get better at it and things like that. It's like it has to somehow return to you,
Yeah.
while we're still living in this capitalist system. Like it still has to do that, and it makes sense why. and
Yeah.
and you know other entities figure out that there's markets there that can be exploited, and then it becomes a quote unquote career path. It
Right.
becomes, and never in a way that is sustainable. It's always going to be in a very exploitative way. And then things like YouTube pop up, and
Mm-hmm.
and now we have like the specter of like, I don't even want to call it AI, but what like generative, whatever it's called, just making everyone afraid of like there's not going to be any more artistic pursuit. It's just going to be content.
Right. Yeah.
So I think what we're ultimately trying to do with this project is really push back against that and create kind of like a space, not just for us to kind of explore this and motivate ourselves and keep ourselves sort of in a mind view. I don't know if that's a term, but kind of like in a perspective of keeping this kind of in our minds, but also to share it with others.
Yeah.
I don't think we don't really have a goal of turning this into content.
Right.
I think we want this to be a very open like exploration, a conversation, an exchange.
Right.
So, that's not to say that it couldn't, work for us that way, but I think we have certain principles that are going to like guide how, we sort of, interact with, any output of this project. And I think the most important thing is that it's a celebration and always an exchange, and always going to be about joy first.
Yeah.
I
Right.
would say. I think the minute it becomes like a job or a chore. I think that's when we're done. We've come to
Yeah.
the conclusion. But I think we're really just trying to resist a lot of these forces, and
Yeah.
this is an attempt to do that, and to bring other folks in that maybe have like-minded folks into this endeavor.
Yeah, related to what you're saying, one of my critical things that I want to push back on is I think we're really starting to see how the um, creator centric model for content, especially, can become a problem because we just keep seeing over and over again, communities will pop up or centered around a creator, and honestly, it kind of becomes a cult of personality. And as soon as that person does something, or they're outed, or like the community falls apart. And something that I am passionate about moving forward is like decentering any one particular individual in something.
Hmm.
So depending on how this thing can grow and go, I could see it becoming like, if we get, somebody sees our podcast on YouTube, and then they could join us, and one week we might have them on to talk about a project they're doing. Um, for me, it's really about fomenting that community and having the creative process be a communal thing, and decentering around the the lone content creator and the community
Right.
that they're trying to build.
Exactly. Yeah. And it definitely getting away from that parasocial relationship, like bonding.
Mm-hmm.
It's exploitative.
Yeah.
It's not healthy for anyone. It's not healthy for the person,
Yeah.
the creator, or
Or the
the
audience. Yeah.
audience.
And you and I know, of course, the our exposure to a couple of different communities that really do focus on that parasocial aspect of
Hmm.
it. And even the people who are involved with it will defend it because in their mind it's something that they benefit from. But if you can take a step back and look to see, it's really not. The broader community doesn't actually benefit from this kind of service that's being provided. And
Entertainment,
I
really.
don't want that. Yeah, exactly. It just boils down to entertainment, it's often under the guise of something more than what it truly is.
Something a little
And
more quote unquote noble.
yeah, it's like you're not just supporting my creation of internet videos. You're helping to dismantle an oppressive system, kind of thing. And I, first of all, I'm kind of over the savior complex thing, and second of all, I don't want to center. I'm tired of thinking I have to center myself in all of the work that I do.
Right, or having like illusions about what exactly
Yeah.
is happening and being
Right.
done. And it's like, I think it's really important to yeah, like have realistic perspective about that, because I do think that art can be resistance. I do think that I think that's really important in the big picture, in the big story,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
But it also isn't, it's not the same thing as direct action, and we
Right.
can't pretend that it is.
Right.
It's what it is, and it has a good purpose in what that does. But this is just one small
Yeah.
aspect of like of what I guess resistance really like means.
Right.
There's and I don't think we even come close to claiming anything like that. I think we have a realistic
Yeah.
idea about what it is, but I do think that it's easy to fall into that trap to think, have like an overblown idea of what you're doing. And we see it all the time online. People think that it's activism to be like retweeting
Yeah.
a post, or putting a picture. And while it can be really important,
Mm-hmm.
it isn't. It's not the same thing as other types of
Yeah. Direct
activities. I don't want to
action.
discount it. Right, exactly. I
Yeah.
don't want to discount it, but I think you should have like a realistic idea of
Yeah.
what it is.
I agree with you on what you just said, and I do agree. I think we are approaching this project with much more, not even just like intention of not making it that sort of thing, but like actively working against trying to center ourselves or pretend like it's more than what it really is. So I'm becoming a fan of, in my personal life, I'm trying to get much more involved in, like actively involved in local grassroots organizations and communities. So I'm kind of over the. I don't know if it's a phase you have to go through or if it just happened to be one that I went through, but that process of feeling like you're changing the world by uploading YouTube videos, and
Right.
I don't have that delusion of grandiosity anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And no, I think a lot of people do go through. It's just evolution. It's just growth. It's just that's how I look at that
Yeah.
stuff. But I do think the fact that we want to really that community is like a central pillar, a central idea that we really want to make that more front and center. And I think talking to other people and inviting other people in is a big part of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And always bringing it back to that. I think that's how that's always going to be like the guidepost,
Mm-hmm.
the guiding light, or however you call
That's
it.
our northern star. That's our.
Our
Yeah.
northern state. But yeah, so all that to say that I think we just want to create this opportunity to really just explore it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're doing. We don't have no grand plan. We don't have any kind of grand like desired outcome other than to just put some good conversations out there in the world, and
Mm.
people can
Yeah.
engage with it or not. And I think you know we're very happy with that. I think we'd be very happy
Yeah.
with whoever or however people will engage with it.
Yeah. If they want to join us in the process, we are more than happy to.
So we did talk a little bit about like how does one begin? Like how do you start? Like how do you go from inaction to action in terms of like exploring like your creative project, things like that. Like we talked a little bit about that, but do you want to maybe get into
Yeah.
some of that? Like maybe some what do you think are the challenges
Yeah.
that what are the big obstacles that people kind of run into, do you think, when it comes to like starting a creative project or exploring like a new creative avenue?
Yeah. I think about for myself personally, a big part of the challenge has been just like emotional burnout and disconnect. And when you're, because I think art comes from a really emotional place. It's intellectual, it's mental, but I think it really has to come from inside that like deepest part of your insides to really be meaningful. Because we talked a little earlier about sometimes you just have to put pen to paper. Um, so something that I've been doing is, and I know it's weird to say this, but like prioritizing self care,
Mm-hmm.
prioritizing community connection, because I feel like the disconnect with other people is a big contributing factor to that burnout that we're experiencing. And just kind of like giving myself space to unpack how living in a society that is trying to extract as much value from us as possible is it's not only not our fault, but it's something we can push back against. And part of that is just recognizing like I deserve rest. I deserve to not grind away at something, and I can make art that doesn't have to be, but allowing yourself just the space to create, and it can be the crummiest, horrible, nonsense garbage you've ever put pen to paper before, but giving yourself the space and understanding to just, you know, the creative process for yourself. It doesn't have to be your magnum opus the first time you start working on it.
Right,
And
right.
then, but that big thing that I keep coming back to is like our connections with other people. I feel are something that's really critical to know that like regardless of anything else that happens in your life, if you have people that you can always fall back on, um, and that's hard. It is hard to find, but
Yeah.
I think it's worth cultivating.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that makes the community aspect so important too, because I think about this concept of like accountability,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a little bit skeptical of it, because I think it shouldn't be to me that idea is coming from like a place of like guilt, like
Mm-hmm.
from of
Yeah.
lacking. It's not really coming from a place of abundance, and I feel like really the way community can help with, you know, being more creative and dedicating yourself more to creativity is kind of the opposite. It's more through encouragement. It's more
Mm-hmm.
through the sharing of it. I feel like when I used to really kind of do a lot more like artwork and stuff online, you know, I was like in a lot of these online communities, and seeing other people do art and work on pieces together, do art trades, art exchanges,
Mm-hmm.
like you would draw each other's characters in different styles or in your style, or you sometimes I would do like commissions for people like in these weird like life. I guess back then it was like a different, I guess a different type of game, but you know, you have like a character and on those weird sites,
Oh
and
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, like, oh god, what was it, like Gaia online, all those weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I remember I would draw like people's characters, and that was like a whole aspect of like online life that you could just really get into. There was all this exchange happening, and you wanted to share, and the more you shared, the more motivated you were to continue doing
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah.
However, I will say that that can also become an obstacle. Not so much community itself, but more how have we been even thinking about community to begin with up until now, like
Right.
especially online and stuff, where especially now I feel like it's even worse, where you're not so much producing to engage with people, even though that is something that could happen. A lot of times it kind of becomes about getting likes, getting views, and
Mm-hmm.
then getting
Yeah.
addicted to that,
Right.
that kind of feedback, which isn't really community. That's like that's just another kind of exploitative, like
Yeah.
weird, like addicted response, you know, where you're
Yeah.
just getting it to, it gives you like that little boost, you know, and that becomes a whole different other thing. And I think that's another thing that we're trying to avoid. And because I think a real community is about like sharing, it's about encouragement, it's about support, it's about actually supporting each other. So if you're, I feel like that's one pillar, that's one aspect that really helps you in
Right.
overcoming that that obstacle of even beginning, of, you
Yeah.
know. And I also think we have a really toxic relationship with this idea of productivity.
Yeah.
I definitely think that's a topic that we could explore on its own.
Yeah. And it is understandable because I think you brought this out just a little while ago. Is when you're in a system where it's like the only real option I have for a better life than a crummy job is, can I start a side hustle or be productive or create, YouTube videos and go viral and blah blah blah. So it's like it's understandable that that's the mold we've been pushed into. And I think that's what we're trying to like actively push back on is like, you know, the art, the creation, the community that can come out of doing this for the love of it instead of like trying to be productive can all, it kind of be a positive feedback loop where it now does kind of reinvigorate you to maybe work out for different goals.
Right. We kind of want to rethink the paradigm of how art is created, produced, shared.
It's like really drawing that line, the distinction between content and art, because
Yeah.
content can be art, it doesn't have to be. Whereas I would say art can be content, but content is not necessarily art.
Right. Right. Art content is like a commodity. Content is, but it's not even really a commodity. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's just like it's meant to be consumed.
It's
It's
just stuff, right?
It's like a bag of chips versus a really nice steak. Cookies versus like a really fine dessert.
Yeah, yeah. It's just it's meant to be consumed and it's meant to be disposable. It's not really meant to be like something that you could come back to, like a book. Like,
Yeah,
a book can be, I mean, although I think even a book could be content.
sure.
But I do think that there's something inherently ephemeral about content.
Right.
It's meant to be like used and thrown away, and you never really look at it ever again. And and you kind of don't want to, because something else has come that
Yeah.
replaced it.
Right. Yeah, because like it's too dangerous to go outside and it's too expensive to go anywhere. So what do? Stay home and watch or play games or watch some new series or. One of my favorite things related to media criticism is I will like watch a YouTube essay about something. For example, I just watched Jesse Gender did a video on the new Matrix movie, and I
Mm.
I was kind of so on the new Matrix movie. I enjoyed parts of it. I thought other parts were kind of boring and a little bit bloated. And watching her deconstruction of why the new Matrix movie is meaningful, um, I'm like I have a new appreciation for it. So like that's one of the things that I enjoy is rather than just like seeking out reviews that are going to reinforce what I already thought about something. It's like, oh, this actually challenged to a person who has a different lived experience than me. This is why it was meaningful to them, and maybe it still doesn't resonate with me as much, but I can now at least appreciate the new Matrix movie for what it tried to do. And I heard that once, like the only objective marker by which you can judge a piece of art is did it accomplish the thing it set out to accomplish. Everything else is just pure taste.
Just taste.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, I mean, if we can figure out a definition for art, that would be quite a feat.
Yeah.
Um,
Because that goes back to your question, like what's the challenges? How do you get at a certain point? You just kind of got to get it in your head that if it's not coming from the depths of your soul, if you're trying to create to a market, if you're trying to create a popular like you're not ever going to be able to pick up on what's going to be meaningful to somebody else. So the only thing you can really ever do is create something that's meaningful to you, and just trust that it's going to reach people that it needs to reach. And it goes back to our we've had discussions before, we've talked about it this time around too, is the heavy consumerist society, especially in Western cultures in which we exist. It's so focused on you got to make something that can be consumed. You have to be productive. And if you're not either of those things, then you're not worth anything. We have to learn to let that go and just trust that art and the community that comes around it is the far more important thing.
or that it has to appeal to the most amount of people as possible.
Right. Yeah. Like
Where it's
maybe
like
it's
there's
okay
so
if you
many
don't like
things
it.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, there's so many factors that go into like why something becomes popular. It's
Hmm.
not because of like necessarily merit
Right.
or
And
or
that,
like or
yeah.
quality or something. So it's like if you produce something that like you said, that's why it's so important to produce to do something that's meaningful to you,
Hmm.
and there will be other people who will it will also resonate with them
Right.
too. It may not be like the majority of
A
people,
million people.
but there
Yeah.
will be other, yeah, there's gonna be other people that if you put it out there, if you, and of course, like, you might have a limited reach, but but that's fine. Like, that shouldn't be like the metric that we judge of like the worthiness of something. If you
Hmm.
enjoy it, if you share it with other people, it's like, I don't know. There's something for everyone, and it doesn't have to like reach like a million people for it to like be something or be good or matter.
Hmm.
We have
Yeah.
to kind of get away from that. Like, I definitely think I would like to get away from that sort of idea
Yeah.
that
Same.
we have to like reach like a billion people.
Or else it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of that poem? There's a poem called "So You Want to Be a Writer" by Charles Bukowski. which I'm always loath to actually mention people anymore because you never know the character of these folks.
Yeah.
But there's this poem, and it's kind of a long poem, so I won't read it. But essentially, the essence of the poem is like, if it's not coming, if it's not bursting out of you, if it's not with your whole heart, soul, mind, body, if you're not just like, you can't, you have to get it out, or else it's going to make you so, like, if that's not how you're feeling about something, then is it really worth? And that's the kind of the opposite extreme to me of the whole. It has to be worthy, it has to be productive, it has to appeal to a bunch of people. Like, there's a middle ground between trying to create something that other people are going to find meaningful and only creating something that is like from the depths of your soul. Because the middle ground is that putting the pen to paper and just getting started. You'll hopefully you'll find your way to your muse, but
Hmm.
we've been so far neglected our creative sides existing in a capitalist hellscape is that we're gonna have to re-nurture that side of ourselves. Maybe that's another way to think of it too. Is you're not going to just if you've been creatively constipated for so long, you're not going to just start again. You're going to have to do the reps. Like literally, when
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you start with walking, and then you start maybe a mile jog, and then a mile run, and then 2 mile run, and all of a sudden now eventually you've trained and you've gotten ready back to it. So the flexing that creative muscle is kind of the same way of exercise, where your first 10 short stories you write might suck. Maybe you don't want anybody to read those 10 short stories. You should be, it'd be nice if you could be in a community that would nurture that, even if it wasn't the objectively best thing ever. Um, your first painting's going to have bad color, color theory is going to be off. Your first video is going to be out of focus. Who knows? Whatever thing you decide you want to do, it's going to suck. But you got to do the reps because there's no other way to
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah, and it's also this thing of you're not it shouldn't really be to like try to impress people
Right.
or I mean because it's I think people I mean this maybe also is like how social media plays in or even just media in general where
Mm-hmm.
you're seeing kind of like the end points of a lot of like work and a lot of like
Yeah.
success
Right.
failure,
Yeah.
you're not seeing all the stuff that
The
takes to
1,000 hours
build up
it
to
took to
get
get there.
there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're not seeing the scrapped sketches, you're not seeing like the things that just didn't work. And all of that iterative thing is that's all part of the process to end up not only producing like the final
Right.
work, but also the building up of the skill that it took to get
Right.
it to be like that. And it's
Yeah.
you're not going to come out like a fully formed like talent like they weren't either. They
Yeah.
had to start, they had to learn, they had to go through. And so it's you know
That's a good point. Yeah.
one of one of my friends leads this nonprofit. When I went to their kind of like their yearly signature event, and one of the really interesting things that they highlighted was they kind of gave out a what did they call it? I think they did call it like an epic failure award, and
Mm.
they talked to several people who involved in the community. They talked about like a big failure that they
Mm.
had and
Mm.
like kind of like what they learned from it, and
Mm-hmm.
they wanted to give space to that part of it too, not just to only talk about like how something turned out great and the success and whatever, but they also gave space for people talking about like this is a time when something didn't work out,
Right.
but we still kind of learned something from it. There was still something to gain from it,
Yeah.
and also to admit that this is part of the reality. This is a part of the process that things don't work out sometimes,
Yeah.
but that also isn't like the final like question. That's not the final like answer. That
Right.
there's it. This is just part of it, and it's important to kind of embrace that, and then
Right.
that's useful too. That has utility in it, and that's all part of like growth and evolving. And I liked that they did that. I liked that they highlighted that because it's really important, because I think then people otherwise get a really skewed
Yeah.
view. It kind of makes people feel like, I mean, I'll admit it too. It's like oftentimes folks like that, I see them and like, wow, they're they're so successful, they're so
Mm-hmm.
smart, they're so like together, like I admire them, I have a lot of respect for them,
I
but
could
then
never
it's
be
like,
them.
right, and then you
Yeah.
compare it, it's like I'm not like that. It's like,
Right.
and then it kind of cuts you off at the knees, like before you even begin,
Yeah.
and you know,
You're your own
and
worst critic, and it keeps you from actually starting down that path.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think all of these things are what kind of contribute to the fear that paralyzes you. And not to mention the fact that our system is really like it's almost act like designed to actively discourage you from
Right.
taking creative risks and uh, trying to do something that is just purely for joy. We're all kind of tricked into thinking that everything that we do has to produce something that
Mm-hmm.
has a value, a
Yeah.
specific kind of value to it, even though like failure also has like value in a different type of sense, and
Yeah.
producing something purely for joy that has value,
Yeah.
rest has value, is very
Yeah.
important.
That's very
So it's
important.
like, I think we're tricked into thinking like we can only produce things that are fully formed and perfect and good, and everything else not only has to be thrown away, but it has to be hidden, and we can't see it or talk about it or acknowledge it. And it's like, no, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's good for us to acknowledge it, to know it, and to understand.
There's two things I glean from what you're just saying. The
Mm.
first thing is going back to that idea of like doing the reps. Um, you see the bodybuilder, you don't see the thousands of hours he's put into the gym. You see the comic book, you don't see when they were 14 and doodling in their journals when they were supposed to be working on math homework. Like, you don't see that part of the process. And what social media has done is made us think like these people are just naturally gifted, amazing artists. Their photography is amazing. Their art's great. Their music, their videos they make. Like, those people have been working and perfecting them. There's like natural talent for sure, but they've also been working and perfecting that craft over, God knows how many hours they've been working on it. Um, and then related to that is the second thing, like you're bringing out about like you have to learn to be okay with the, I wouldn't say like the quality that you'd be putting out in those learning stages, but the learning stage exists. You have to go through. Everybody has to go through that. Um, and the really important thing that we keep coming back to is like having a community that's supportive, that will will encourage you through it and give you helpful feedback. That's really important because if you put something out into like social media that's objectively not as good as other things, you're always going to get at best it's going to be ignored. Like that's best case scenario is nobody even
Yeah.
sees. The worst case scenario is you get people piling on you for being bad. And the example I kind of I said that one thing I'm trying to get back into is RPG Maker. My very first game that I put together, I was like playing online games with this group of people, and I said, hey, you guys should try this out. Tell me what you think. And sure enough, the very first feedback I got was from this guy, like, this is the worst thing I've ever played. I will never touch anything you ever put out. And I was fortunate enough that somebody else stood up and called that out and said, don't be a jerk. It's like, this is far better than the first thing I put together. Jordan, keep working on this. Keep
Yeah.
practicing your craft. If it hadn't been for him coming to my rescue in that moment, I probably would have never. I was like, okay, fine, done with this. Never going to do this ever again. So maybe that's something that our little community we're trying to build can be, is like that place to work on stuff, and we're not going to tolerate or not like feedback, yes, but like destructive
Mm,
criticism, absolutely not.
right. Yeah, and I mean, I think that's where like actual community comes into play. It's
Right.
like when I was in art school, we did critiques
Mm-hmm.
on each other's work.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was a constructive process. That was not about like tearing each other down or
Right.
making people feel bad. It was everyone was at a different skill level. I don't even want to really say
Yeah.
like levels, but yeah, everyone had different skills, different style, and was trying to do a different thing. And a critique is really about like, okay, was this successful, or like how could you, is there like what is everyone else seeing that maybe the person's not seeing? And that's helpful because then you get feedback and it helps you in future work. Because there's two things that is not helpful. One is just tearing a person down, but also the other one I would say that is not helpful is just completely uncritical, like just praise. Like we can also see how that can also be like almost hurtful to the person too, because then they can't grow, they can't understand what, if you're just, if it's, which is a different kind of dynamic and a different type of problem. But like a critique means it's a balance, it's both. It's like, this is what you're doing well, this is where you're succeeding and what you set out to do, which kind of goes back to your idea of what, like, I guess art could be. And like, here's what kind of doesn't work, at least from someone's perspective. And you can keep, maybe you disagree with that, but you can keep whatever you think maybe is helpful to you, and you can just kind of discard the rest. And it's not, you're more empowered to just kind of like make a decision on what you want to do, rather than like, did approval, disapproval.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You need that safe space to be able to feel comfortable in putting something out there and receiving criticism and feedback on it that is meant to help you be better and not to not to tear you down.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. To improve.
Yeah. Because that is the unfortunate other aspect of, we've talked about the pressures you receive from social media, but like I said, best case scenario is you put something out there and nobody sees it. It kind of stinks I guess that's not best. Best case scenario is somebody sees it, enjoys it, and gives you feedback, helpful feedback. But the most often thing that happens is people ignore it. They don't even see it. But then the worst case scenario is you get so discouraged from the feedback that you just quit and give up altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sad.
Yeah, it's like it goes back to your first question about like what's the challenge? I think the challenge is just being okay with that initial part of the process. And if it's been years since you've practiced your craft, if you're trying to start a new craft, it's going to take some time to get back into the process, and being okay with that. And maybe it does involve developing a little bit of a thicker skin, because you're going to have to learn to take feedback and criticism from people who are willing to give it to you. And like, I really like that point you made too about a good skill to have is being able to take some feedback, what applies, what doesn't, and then was my mom used to say that to me all the time, because when you grow up in that kind of environment, a high control religion, you get feedback all the time from people who are wanting to criticize you, and whether it's merited or not, they're going to do it. So it helps to develop that thicker skin where you can just say, well, this is really more about them. It's not really about me. So thank you for that perspective, but I'm not going to internalize it. So, and that goes back to my first point about like just the emotional burnout. If you're burnt out emotionally, you're not going to be able to create, and B, you're going to be so afraid of putting yourself out there that you're not even going to start, let alone work at it and keep improving.
Yeah. So a lot of it is really like emotional, psychological, just kind of changing the stories that we're telling ourselves that are preventing us from really beginning, and confronting that fear that is paralyzing us, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So maybe that's what we can become, is a community that allows people to rest and take the steps they need to get back in the creative process. And then when they're ready for that, we can support them. We can offer feedback. We can offer support. We can,
be a safe space.
Safe space. Which, those exist. I also encourage people to look into their local, there's that, meetup.com, see if there's some writers groups in the area. Go to your library.
Art groups. There's groups that sketch. There's groups
sketch
that
groups, videographer groups, photo group. There's really common to find like people who will go photo walks and allow you to practice and learn about how to take pictures better. And
I think it's getting more popular to do like life drawing.
Yeah.
That's like a thing that I've seen where you kind of do like as a group, So it's almost like that like wine and painting thing,
Yeah.
but now with like life drawing.
Yeah.
I've seen that. I've seen that. And it's a, and that's like it's a fun way of just kind of doing it and like
Yeah.
getting familiar with it, getting comfortable with it again.
Absolutely.
There's all kinds of ways that community and creativity overlap and come
Yeah.
together and complement
For
one
sure.
another.
Something I'm personally trying to do is just pushing back on pop psychology has kind of made people think
Yeah.
that everybody sucks and everybody's horrible, and you can live your life that way. I'm not going to say you shouldn't, or maybe you have life experiences that has made you feel unsafe in the world, but I think you might be surprised how good a community you really can form if you just put yourself out there a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I echo that sentiment. How about you? You go first. I volunteered the thing and then I
Sure.
throw it to you.
I'll admit I'm I'm really grateful for my new job that I have, which I know sounds weird, but hear me out.
Mm-hmm.
From as long I and like I'm recognize that I've lived a pretty privileged life in a lot of ways, but I started working when I was 14. It started with summers, and then as I got older, it was like working with school and going to school and working, and then I graduated high school and I started working secularly as well as working for the religion, Jehovah's Witnesses at the time. I went to their compound in New York and I worked 40, 50 hours a week. And then on top of that, weekends were dedicated. So, like, my entire life up until this last September when I took my current job, I've worked 40 hours a week is the bare minimum that I've worked for literally 15 years of my life. And I finally got into a job where I enjoy it, B, I have good coworkers, C, I make a decent amount of money, and
Mm.
E, I can go home from work at the end of the day and just turn it off and I can just go home and not have to worry about work. So what I'm grateful for is getting to that point in my life, in my career, where I can actually make enough money to support my living expenses comfortably and have the emotional and intellectual energy to go home and actually work on a project, like a creative project. Um, and like I said, I get it. That's a really privileged thing. Not everybody can find that. Not everybody has it, but that's what I'm currently grateful for.
Wonderful.
Yeah. How about
Um,
you? What are you currently grateful for?
I think I'm thinking along the same similar lines as you. I am currently grateful for being able to pay my bills. It's for a long time that was not a possibility,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, it's not like a new thing lately, but it's something that I am, I think about a lot that I'm very grateful
Yeah.
for. That can be really tough. It's extremely echoing what you said. It can be extremely stressful to have to worry about that all the time and to
Mm-hmm.
have the position in life that I have now where I don't really worry about it. I still think about it, but like I know that it's covered. I don't have to like worry about the bank account being too low and getting
Mm-hmm.
overdrafted and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That really alleviates so much and definitely frees
Yeah,
up
it
space
does.
for, like you said, like thinking about more creativity, thinking about
Yeah.
allowing yourself to rest.
Yeah.
It kind of takes away. I mean, I know that's like a whole. You got to shift your thinking too, really, but it definitely helps to
Yeah.
give you the permission to rest when you need to rest. So I'm
Right.
definitely grateful for being able to pay those bills. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's that 10-ton elephant in the room that nobody ever wants to address, where if you're stuck working minimum wage, or you have people who depend on you, so you have to work multiple minimum wage jobs, and
Hmm.
minimum wage jobs usually suck. I've been there. I've worked minimum wage jobs. I've worked less than ideal jobs, and that's where it keeps coming back to this whole like capitalist extractive system. Is like, if we were to exist in a society that didn't nickel and dime you for your time and attention, and then it gives you like this cheap content to try to like keep you. It gives you something to do to get just enough rest so that you can go back to work the next day. Um,
Hmm.
it is a very privileged thing to be able to be like, I have a job that actually pays me enough money that I don't have to work 60 hours, 70 hours a week overnight. I don't have a bunch of mouths to feed. So for me, in a way, it's almost like I owe it to those who can't to be creative and to put art out there in the world. And it's not like you can just say, get a better job, because that's bullcrap. That's not actually what it is. It's, but the something I keep being impressed upon with following what's going on in Palestine is like the joy that they're able to still extract from life. And that kind of gives, that joy is supposed to like reinvigorate you so that you can keep fighting the fight, so you can work towards a more equitable and just world. So, it's this positive feedback loop of like, now that I am in a position where I'm not scraping by for survival, I need to work in my community to improve for what I can here locally, and I owe it to those who can't to express myself creatively and create community with other people, so we can all work towards that. Because I do, like, Sunday at the Grammys, screw famous celebrity people, but Tracy Chapman gets up there and performs one of the best songs that has ever been made, and it's like I still have to believe, because if this is not true, then what's the freaking point? I have to believe that like there exists an alternate reality where humans decided to love each other and take care of each other, and that piece of art, that song, is a glimpse into that kind of lifestyle where we had chosen, rather than to be extractive and to take advantage of each other, we had chosen to form communal care and a more socially equitable type of life. So art for me is what I've learned is that way to like look into a world that could be better. So that, yeah.
we can imagine a better
world. Yeah. So I feel like I owe it to people to like explore with my art a better world, and then my actions need to line up with that, so that I'm doing everything I can to try to contribute to that.
I agree. We're on the same page with that. Well, that's it for today. Thanks so much for joining us and being a part of our conversation, and great talking to you. See you next time.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you on the next time.
Thank you for taking this journey with us. How are you creatively expressing yourself this week? We're gathering a community of creatives, so join us in our Discord or connect with us on social media. You can find all of the links below.